right. So, round two with Dr. Jeff Standridge, this guy that seems to be able to, I don't know, he's like a mini me Elon Musk. I don't even know if that's the right reference, but a fascinating guy. So, yeah, you obviously were away when we recorded this, so you now have had a chance to have a little look. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, full of amazing insights. So,
yeah,
yeah, let's get started. Basically, if you're involved in building a product or starting a company or anything like that, or actually if you're running a company and you're part of the leadership team,
yeah. I
full
mean,
of
even
very,
to
very
just
good gems.
think about starting one.
Mm.
You literally have got an idea for something and some fundamental basics and principles and values to think upon. And Jeff's got some really good insight. So yeah, let's have a listen.
That sounds good.
So let's move on then to innovation. Now you're something that's called an innovation consultant.
Mhm.
So I guess from my point of view, what is that, and how the devil do you stay at the forefront of innovation? Well, I guess partly on top of everything else that you do as well.
Well, so first of all, we start by defining innovation, right? Innovation, in the way we define it, is planned change that is directed at either more pleasant or more efficient or effective ways of doing things, or doing things that substantially reduce the transaction cost of doing a particular business. So
Yeah.
it's planned change. And so that then connotes or suggests that there's a process around that planned change. And so we actually are more what I would consider process consultants for innovation,
Right.
than innovation, in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
We stay on top of a lot of technological innovations and what companies are doing to drive innovation, the processes they're using, and we kind of assimilate those. We've built kind of our own end-to-end innovation process.
Right.
It's kind of a three-step process, disrupting the status quo,
Yep.
creating massive value, and then making it stick. So it's problem identification, it's solution design, and then it's organizational change to implement that solution.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we do when we're working with an organization. We may run an innovation sprint that's just focused on pain storming, so to speak, to help them identify the biggest challenges they have in their business. And once we identify the 3 or 4 of those, then we may take them on a design sprint to begin designing solutions to solve those challenges.
Yeah.
And so that's when we work with an organization on the innovation front, it's to help them make their organizations better using the process of innovation.
Now the challenge
or
that
to create new products and services.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. The challenge there is that change there being central, probably core to that, particularly in bigger businesses, it's very difficult to do, and it takes an awful long time.
That's right. Yes, that's exactly right. Very difficult to do.
Yeah. How do you coach people through that change then, or is that where you go, well, this is where the system is, and we take you through the steps?
Yeah.
Is it people change, or is it process change as well?
Yeah, and many times it's both, right?
Right.
So I actually came to the world of innovation and entrepreneurship by being an entrepreneur and a corporate change agent. So entrepreneurship is doing entrepreneurial things, but within the safety net of a corporate salary, so to speak.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was in the mergers and acquisition world for the company I worked for that took me to Europe and China and Australia and Brazil and what have you, either starting or acquiring companies within the portfolio of this larger organization.
Right.
And then I was kind of a change agent within the company. We're currently working with about a $50 million company that's in a couple of different locations. They're a very distributed workforce with their entire sales organization, not just their sales, many of their ops functions even spread around the country. And we're going through a complete organizational transformation process with them.
Wow.
And helping them kind of re-envision the future, re-hone their strategy. We've restructured the organization with a completely new set of top leaders in the organization. They're bringing in a new CEO, and so we've been working with them since the latter part of last year, and we'll continue working with them throughout this year to really drive just a completely new organization forward.
Wow, that's a brave move, isn't it? To reshell and kind of wipe clean it, as it were, start again.
It really is. It really is. I mean, they've completely changed the top layer of the organization, the kind of the senior level direct reports to the CEO, even bringing in a new CEO.
Wow.
It's the thing about it though is that they're probably had their record month in April, and I haven't seen May yet, but probably May as well. So they're continuing to just deliver phenomenal results. They're growing very, very rapidly, but it's one of the classic examples of what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
And so they've kind of got to that $40 to $50 million level, but they want to be $150 million. And they knew that to get there, they were going to have to break apart the organization and put it all back together again.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect segue into leadership generally, actually, because again, I've seen this for a long time. There are good leaders, there are bad leaders, and one of the challenges with leadership generally is the fact that it's a choice, but there's no support or training necessarily. I think the stat is something like 80% of all leaders have never had any sort of formal training. So, I mean, how a business gets to 50 million without kind of a leadership structure that basically doesn't have that any sort of formal capacity to understand what leadership should be. Not only that, leadership, if you take it even 3 years ago, 5 years ago, the change has been exponential in terms of what's expected, how the swingometer, if you like, has gone from the company having all the power to the employees having more power, and then kind of centering now somewhere in the middle where it's a relationship and kind of we're working on it kind of scenario. So what as a leadership coach, what are you seeing, what are you experiencing right now across the board? Are you seeing the same sort of thing in the States with the organizations that you're working with? Again, we're still hitting up against this kind of, we're putting leaders in place, and actually the problem is the fact that we're not supporting them, we're not leading the leaders properly.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different take on that. The research where I got into the leadership world was as a young graduate student back in the 90s. I was studying the differences in top performers in the healthcare world at that time and average performers.
Right.
And ended up, as a result of that research, being asked to move into an IT company to do the same research. And I was looking at what are the differentiators of success. And what I found was that it had nothing to do with academic credentials, with certifications and letters behind one's name, or how many hours of classroom training they had. It really boiled down to behavior.
Yeah. And
behaviors that center around two different concepts: results and relationships. And so each of us has tendencies. Some of us are more results oriented and some of us are more relationship oriented. But people who are consistently successful, either as individual contributors or even as leaders, are able to balance those two very, very well. If I focus on results at the expense of relationships, I will experience wild success very quickly until I alienate everyone around me who's responsible for helping me maintain those results, and then I lose them both. But by the same token, if I focus on relationships at the expense of results, people will love me until they lose respect for me because I can't do what I say I'm going to do when I say I'm going to do it, and I can't deliver consistent results. So it's this constant tightrope. And I think leaders, everyone has the responsibility of owning their tendencies in that regard, discovering them and then owning them, and then creating mechanisms around themselves to help them maintain that balance. As a leader, the most ineffective form of education or training or skill development that occurs is in a classroom setting with a talking head in front of the room, right?
Yeah.
But some people learn okay that way. It's just the least effective for the most people. The second form is some form of self-development where I do some assessment, I get some feedback, I figure out what I'm strong in, what I'm weak in. Maybe I leverage someone to kind of give me some feedback. And then I go and begin to do some self-learning to fill in those gaps. The third form is through relationships. I surround myself with people and give them permission to be critical with me and to give me feedback and to hold me accountable and provide me some coaching. And maybe it's a formal coaching relationship, maybe it's more of an informal mentoring relationship, but I seek out those mentors versus the company pairing me with them.
Yeah.
I actually take ownership. And then the final way is experiences.
Yeah.
You know, when I was asked to move to the UK and oversee the acquisition of 21 companies in 7 countries, I was 5 years out from being a respiratory therapist in a clinical environment. I had no business background, but my leader saw something in me and she put me in a situation where I was kind of sink or swim based upon my experiences. And so, you know, that continuum of classroom training to self-development to relationships and mentoring and coaching to actually new experiences. I think we all as leaders have to leverage that continuum in proper proportions to our learning styles to be able to develop and change with the times.
Do you think there's a huge amount of fear in leadership because of those areas are not all covered or understood or talked about enough? It's too formal. It's a leadership. Basically, you need to tell people what to do, and they'll do all the work for you. You've just got to manage the people. It seems to be a very simplistic approach. Do you think that the fear element, ego as well, of course, but is that the biggest problem we face?
Yeah, I think it's fear and ego, and you know, I do agree with you that we're not doing a good job of supporting our leaders, but the way I would support a leader is to expect them to have a development plan.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, I want you to go assess your own weaknesses. I want you to get feedback, and then I want you to identify those areas of opportunity or those development needs, and I want you to put together a development plan. Then I want you to come sit down with me, and I'm going to assess your ability in assessing yourself, your accuracy in assessing yourself, and I'm going to give you some additional feedback and make some additional development recommendations, and then you're going to go execute that plan.
Yeah.
Versus me bringing in, you know, a trainer to come and train you, because what you may need is different than what she may need and what he may need and what have you. And I can't find that many trainers. So let's build a plan that's customized for you. And I want you to take ownership in building that plan, and I'll help you refine it.
Yeah. And it takes quite a lot of guts to be that vulnerable.
Oh, you know, it's interesting you say that. So when I started my career in the corporate world, in this IT company, I was 30 years old or so, fresh out of being literally a respiratory therapist in a hospital. And I never will forget, I was sitting in a meeting with my new team. I'd maybe been there 2 weeks. And we were talking, I don't even remember the topic, but we were talking about a project that maybe hadn't gone as we'd planned or something like that. And the executive was a female leader. The executive of that group, she said, yeah, you know what? That was a failure on my part. That's on me. I let you guys down. I'll take responsibility for that. I'm going to correct that. I was blown away. I had never heard such strength and such vulnerability at the same time in a meeting like that, where someone stood up and said, I failed you guys and I'm going to correct that.
Yeah. It's powerful.
It had a huge impact on me. Had a huge impact.
And vulnerability in leadership has become quite a hot topic, hasn't it? It's become, again, much more acceptable. I think partly because men are talking about it a lot more because they can. I mean, so many other reasons. I suppose there's thousands of reasons, but it's a very powerful tool, this vulnerability. You know, even I think Stephen Jobs was alluding to it when he said, don't employ smart people and tell them what to do. That ultimately saying, as a leader, be vulnerable. Employ these people and help them, elevate them because you can, but they'll elevate you at the same time. That's the whole point. As the tide rises, all boats should.
I talked about results and relationships a few moments ago. I'm a results guy.
Yeah.
I do a pretty good job at relationships, but when it really hits the fan or when the pressure's on, I'm going to err toward the results. So I had someone that I hired. Her name was Brenda. I called her Bryn. She was about 10 years, maybe 15 years my senior. And when I was this young, snot-nosed executive really trying to climb the ranks, I depended on her. She would come into my office and she would sit down and she kind of let out a big sigh, and I'd say, well, Bryn, what's going on? And she'd say, well, in the town hall today, when you said A, B, and C, I say, yeah. She said, well, there were some people who didn't hear A, B, and C. They heard X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh no, that's not what I needed them to hear at all. And then I would say, what I need to do? Well, I think you need to go have a conversation with these folks and ask them what they thought about the meeting and give them the opportunity to share that feedback with Bryn. That's great. I'll go do that now, So she really helped me kind of walk that balance. And had I say that she was probably the reason I didn't get fired the first 3 years I was there.
Yeah, we've all had one of those. I had one of those as well. Her name was Ruth. I just called her Ruth because I think if I called her anything else, she'd have hit me. But she was the same. She influenced me hugely because she based all of her work on principle, on value, on what it meant to her personally to achieve. She had goals that she wanted to do, and that was super powerful, I think. Sure. Almost like a coach within a system, right. Within a mentor. And she'd done jobs, and I think one of the roles that she led a team of 150 people. So, the whole business that I was working in there, or the section of it, was only 63. So, she was wildly more experienced in some areas. So it would have been stupid for me not to listen. So I really resonate with that. Well, that's really great insight there, Jeff. Thank you ever so much. Just a couple more last quick questions, really. There seems to be a big fascination. Now, these are kind of more personal about you as an individual, I guess, really. So fascination with morning routines. There's 5 a.m. clubs. There's people who get up and the first thing they do, I think Mark Wahlberg gets in an ice bath and all this kind of stuff. They have these morning routines which set them up for the day. And we all know morning routines are very important. Is this something that you believe in? Is it something you do? Have you got one, and does it work?
For the most part, I have a routine. Now, I'm not the the 75 hard or the 5 a.m. club or the ice bath guy. But I do generally go to bed at roughly the same time, and I tend to get up at roughly the same time. I seldom set an alarm anymore. Unless I know that I need to be up for a very specific reason, and then I'll set an alarm, but I'm usually awake before the alarm goes off. But I'm usually I start waking up around 4:30 or 5. I may not get out of bed until 5:30 or 6, but I may lay there and just kind of gear up for the day. I go and hit the shower and fix a cup of coffee, and I come to my office. My wife won't let me work from home. She said that's her office, and I infringe on her territory. And so 8 years ago, when I left the corporate world to start my own thing, I worked from home for about 3 months, and she was like, yeah, that's not happening anymore. So I have an office. It's only about a 5-minute drive, but it's downtown on the high street here. And so it's kind of my place, and I enjoy it. I come here.
Well, it looks like home.
Yeah. I turn on CNBC, and I watch the early start of the market and answer a few emails from the night before, and then go about my day. There are some days when I'm at my best, there's usually an exercise routine.
Yep.
I was a cyclist for a number of years, and then I started flying, and that kind of took my time away to cycle. But yeah, I do generally have some kind of physical activity. It may only be just a few minutes. And so that's kind of my morning routine. It's just kind of gearing up for the day. And then I have one usually at the end of the day when I am able to get home at a decent hour is to usually I'll go outside. We've got an outdoor living area kind of in the garden area, and I'll go out there and sit, might have a refreshment and reflect on the day. But yeah, I think the thing that probably contributes the most benefit to me is having the consistency of going to bed and getting up. Those two things.
I think it's true for so much in life. Is actually having that consistency enables you to achieve so much more because you know what's coming and you plan for it. And
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I guess similar really. I'm not 5 Club, ice bath and all that kind of stuff. I try and exercise regularly, and I try and go away to exercise, so there's a place to do that rather than at home or anything like that, because I think that's important to do that. Obviously children, dogs, those kind of things, they add into throwing the routine out of sync.
For sure.
Same as internet engineers as well, but I guess I've got an interest in this because there's no one way anyway, and everyone's got their own style, and I think it's not necessarily something that is a precursor for great leadership that you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, because if you sit for 2 hours and waste it just looking at social media, then that's not really helping you. So there needs to be purpose behind it, of course.
I like to talk about being intentional, being intentional about what you do. I am intentional about getting in the bed at an early hour. I may finish the day out with a brief video streamed TV show or something before I finally turn out the lights. But I turn out the lights pretty much at the same time every night, and usually don't have a hard time falling asleep, and usually wake up on my own as a result. And so I think that intentionality is probably more important than what you're actually intentional at.
And it's good for the human body and mind actually to have that structure, isn't it? To have that intentionality around it as well. I certainly find that myself. Is I'm at my best when I've exercised and I have a better structure during the day. I have a plan when I planned for the day.
For sure. I have a room right back there. There we go. And I have a couch and a telly and so there are days where I've been very busy for 2 or 3 days, and then I'll look and I've got an hour break in my calendar, and I'll just go in there. I won't turn on the telly. Usually I'll turn off the light, and I might just lie down on the couch and just ruminate. I might just let my brain slow down. And, won't take a nap. I'm not a big napper. No. But I'll just sit in the dark and clear my mind. And when I go on vacation or I go on holiday, all of my team members know that once I go to the beach and I've got about 48 hours of not doing anything, my mind gets clear, and then all these ideas start coming out. So then I start texting all of my teammates saying, we could do this and we could do this, and we could, back to your American optimism guy, right? And so I've got business partners in several different businesses, and they all joke about having a Jeff Standridge vacation support group. So because I have literally been in 4 text threads with 4 different business partners at the same time while I'm sitting on the beach with different ideas for each of those businesses. And they're like, can you not go away again? So,
or only go away for like a day and a half.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Don't let him go away for more than 48 hours.
Actually, I found myself, my family used to say there was a sort of a 2 or 3 day period when I used to go away, and I needed that just to decompress.
Yeah.
And I started then my holiday 2 or 3 days in, but conversely, on the other end of the holiday, I started to ramp up a couple of days with one stuff.
I have found the exact same thing. So I will take a day off, maybe a day or 2 before we leave.
Yeah.
And I'll ramp down to the out of office on my email, right?
Yeah.
And then I will come back a day, 2 days before I start to work, and I'll ramp back up. I've found the exact same thing. That off ramp and on ramp kind of process it's heaven, quite frankly.
It makes a huge difference actually, and takes so much pressure out of that kind of kick-in day. Anyway, your time is precious. There's one last thing, if I may, and it's just we haven't really touched on the side of education, so we'll just briefly, if I may, just indulge that a little bit. What, as an educator, with all the things that you do for Arkansas University and the young minds that you're teaching, could you give me then 3 things that you would pass on to the future generation of entrepreneurs and innovators that would become part of their kit bag of success? Sure.
And I'd have to, the first one I have to borrow from my friend Ash Maurya, who said, don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem you're trying to solve. And so, in the entrepreneurial finance class that I teach, I put a big focus on, let's define the problem that you're trying to solve. Let's quantify that problem, and let's test it and see if it's viable from a business perspective. We can build a viable business around it. So that process of of problem identification, customer discovery, quantification of the problem is really huge. The second one is I teach entrepreneurial finance, but I spend the first 2 weeks teaching personal finance because what I have found is I see entrepreneurs who struggle to be successful purely because they don't know how to manage a checkbook, even their home checkbook, and they run their business like they run their home. And you know, in America, we have a terrible financial problem. The vast majority of Americans cannot incur a $1,000 unplanned expense without going into debt. 2/3 of Americans spend more than they earn and use credit cards to finance the difference. And so I spend 2 weeks teaching just the basics of personal finance before we ever start teaching finance, entrepreneurial finance. And so that's number 2. And then the third one is I believe that we should spend more time, and it's been my experience as well, we should spend more time teaching people how to find and utilize mentors than we do trying to train older, more experienced people to be mentors. Companies that try to create a mentor match program, they say, yeah, we're going to pair you with someone. What if I don't like this guy? What if he doesn't like me? So we could do a better job of teaching younger people how to go and find mentors in their lives, how to evaluate where they need mentors, how to find those mentors and how to use those mentors. And it probably never requires the utterance of, would you be my mentor? You know, you never have to have that conversation, because when I ask them, would you be my mentor, that shifts the responsibility psychologically to them. Where the better question is, hey, I really respect what you've been able to do. Can I buy you a cup of coffee or breakfast or lunch and just pick your brain? I've got a few questions I'd love to ask you.
Much better approach.
So those 3 things. Love the problem and not the solution. Fall in love with the problem. Learn how to manage your own finances, personal finances first, so that you can then learn how to manage your business finances. And number 3, get good at knowing what you don't know and finding and utilizing mentors to help you fill the gaps.
Absolutely. Powerful stuff. Jeff, thank you so much. It has been an absolute privilege to have this time with you, and for, you know, really grateful for you taking the time out of your busy schedule to allow this as well. I think there is so much there. I mean, we scratched the surface on so much, and there is so much more that I would love to talk to you about, and perhaps we can have you on again another time.
That sounds great. I appreciate it. It's been an honor and a pleasure spending time with you, and I'd be honored to come back anytime.
That's fantastic. Jeff, all the best, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Let me just say that if anybody wants to reach out, I'm available on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn, or jeffs@innovationjunkie.com.
Absolutely, yes. And I'll make sure as well that I put all the details about your books and websites and things like that, so people can, if they want to reach out and contact you, they'll be able to do so. So again, Jeff, thanks you.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Right, you obviously met him in part 1, so you got to know this guy and all he can do. So part 2, okay, we didn't cover quite as much stuff, but my goodness,
lot more business relevant stuff though. I think, which was and leadership relevant stuff, which was really interesting.
The guy's obviously seen quite a lot and been involved. I was impressed with the, you know, kind of, because obviously I didn't know this chap before I agreed to have him on as a guest, but it's the experience that this guy's got with, you know, taking the first example he talks about is this 50 million business that they want to double the size of it. I mean, that's not a small job to do.
So what I found really interesting about that was the, you know, because obviously I started in the office, so that's my baby. If it gets to that size, and I remember I think it was Stephen Bartlett talking about it as well, where you step down, and the guy from Gymshark, can't remember his name now, but where they've stepped down. They've stepped down from the CEO role, and let someone else handle that. And there's parts of me that's like, God, that's really brave, and also, I mean, very results driven, where you're going, I'm not the right person for this. We need to find someone that either has experience or is the right person to take
Yeah.
this over. That's unbelievable. So the change management of that,
Yeah. So watch yourself.
yeah. Yeah. Well, if we get to the 50 million to 150 million, I'm all over that. That's
You're
brilliant.
fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, you crack on. I'm going to sit in the
Yeah.
background and I'll code the hell out of other stuff just for fun. Other fun
Yeah,
projects, passion projects.
exactly. But yeah, it was the it's also the fact that he's sort of, he was talking about being an agent for change
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being more of an entrepreneur within companies. And that do feel is, change within a company is hard, obviously.
Yeah.
And maybe you do actually need something that's quite a big event. So, like getting rid of the C-suite and bringing new people in is such a massive event, but it will encourage everyone to be a bit more open-minded and go, oh, right, well, we need to, things are changing. It's not just carry on with the same old. So,
Yeah, because one of the first things you think about there is, well, they must have failed. Well, hang on a minute. No,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the case. You know,
Yeah.
you go to a doctor and, you go to a GP and they'll get you to a certain level, but beyond there, it's, you go to a consultant and you have your eyes done. It's not
Yeah.
that doctor didn't fail, it's just not his specialism or her
Yeah.
specialism.
Yeah.
It's this doctor, Dr. Sarah Smith, she is a absolute specialist in there. Well, surely you'd rather want to go and do that. Now, by that stage, there'll be, the CEO isn't necessarily the person who runs the company anymore. There's shareholders and other leadership team. And if they're all saying, well, but you're right. I think it takes an incredibly brave person to go, do you know what? Failure, I don't see this as failure as the CEO.
No.
I see this as, I've got the vision, I've got the empathy, I've got the understanding to go, I can move on to something else. I did this business to 50 million and that's my, I'm cool with that.
Yeah. So if you're happy with that and you want to continue and be at that level, that's fine. If you've got a different view, and the other thing that he was talking about when he was mentioning about leadership and the two different types, so are you results or are you relationship driven?
Yeah.
And also, what do you then default back to in terms of pressure and how you need to know your weakness? And, because you can work on these skills, you can say, actually, I do need to be more results driven because I'm too much on the relationships. But if you know your weakness, then you can step out of the way and get someone else in that can help.
Yeah.
Or
That's
you can
leadership.
Yeah.
I was just saying, that's just great leadership to be able to go, I've got a hole there, I need to fill it.
Yeah.
It's just smart.
Yeah. And I think we do get, our own egos and arrogance sometimes get in the way of those things where you're going, well, actually, I want to keep my hands on the wheel. I want to keep the control because this is mine. And, or even I want to be the CEO. I'm much better if I'm actually in design and working on the product, but I want to have the title of CEO, and that's what's important. So, well, in which case, you're not going to reach the things that you want because you get to the edge of your weaknesses, don't you? And that's where you start to fall down and things get more difficult.
Yeah, we had a consultant I know called Tim Thrippland, and he talks about leading on the edge and about hitting your edges. And that's where you really find out, kind of where your weaknesses are, and you should be continually pushing to hit those edges all the time, and then doing something about it. He said, that's something that he talks about a huge amount, actually. Tim, really lovely guy. But yeah, I agree. I think it's that having the ability to spot those. I'm not so good at that. How good are we? In all of our different roles. As an office manager. What are the things you kind of go, I should be really good at these things, but that's a weakness. How do you address that? Or do you go, no, do you know what? It doesn't come up that much, so I'll leave that for another time. Or do you make that part of your personal development? Or is it, well, I know that's going to be a problem, so you put something in place to try and counteract that, or you'll be honest with your team and sit in front of them and say, look, I'm not really great at that. I did this once and I think it worked out okay. I'm not really great at that bit, but if that comes up, then we'll work on that together. Are you comfortable with that? Yeah, fine, no problem at all, whatever. So
it's knowing we did this a lot with the GB rifle team. We focus on owning your own performance.
Yeah.
And that's partly, to say you can't, if you're failing at something, or if you have a bad shoot, or you're dropping points or whatever, you don't blame someone else.
Yeah.
but also it's having that responsibility. And it's going back to sort of one of the things that Jeff mentioned in the first pod, about 100% accountability
Mm.
for your own actions. And it's going, well, I want to do something, but my weaknesses mean that I can't get past that. So yeah, do you learn? And it's knowing actually where, is this something that you could improve at, or something you should improve at, or is it something where you go, that's just not going to be part of my skill base, so I'll get someone in, as you said,
Yeah.
to cover it. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
owning your own performance and being brave enough and being a good enough leader to accept that, and not be the I know everything person.
Because the other thing as well, and I had this where, if you're embedded with your team and you're working quite closely with them, rather than sitting in an office and kind of just see them once a week, they will know this anyway. Your team, they will see where the areas where, because of your behavior, because of your actions, and because of the outcomes, they will go, yeah, we can kind of say. So if you gloss over that or pretend that doesn't exist, or if you've got some sort of emotional response to them questioning that, they know. A good team, smart team will know that. So it's far better to go be honest and right up front and be vulnerable and go, I am really crap at Excel, but I don't really use it that much. So has anybody here got any skills and they can support me with that? Being vulnerable, how much trust does that? Well, he's asking me, she's asking me, and yeah, I've got some skills, so I can really help with that. And that's good for the team. That's good for what we're trying to do. And that's not kissing up to the boss. That's actually just, kind of, you can't be goalie, defender, midfielder, striker. You can't. You can't do it all. One person running around against 13. It's crazy. So,
So, but I think that it's a really interesting point that you went on to there. That it's sort of like an unwritten thing where it's you know how someone is and how they behave, and the team dynamic should be that it's safe enough that you can get things done without necessarily having to say them. And I thought that sort of relates a bit to the mentorship stuff that Jeff and you were talking about, where I really love Jeff's thing that if you want a mentor, you don't find someone and go, will you be my mentor? Because that's but mentorship as well isn't necessarily one person. It's anyone that influences you. I thought that was it was really interesting because you were talking, he had was it Brenda, and you mentioned Ruth, that who wasn't actually a mentor, but was someone that influenced you and that made you think about things in a different way. And that's what's so important, is that you have these people that
it really is
throw different things at you that you might not have thought about.
I think the commonality between those two examples was that were based on values and principles, both the impact that they had. For Jeff, it was, she stood up and went, I don't know how to do that. I need help. She was being vulnerable. And it's like, when you first experience somebody that you think, oh my goodness, particularly he was an undergraduate or postgrad, wasn't he, or something? He was like 21 or straight out of uni. And you don't expect that in somebody that you revere. When you first join a company, it's like, oh my goodness, this person's God. They're the person that can hire and fire me. They're saying, I don't know how to do that and I need help. It's like, really? Well, yeah, but that's actually why you're there. And it's like, oh yeah, of course. And for me, it was exactly the same thing. It was teaching through behavior and values, or behavior based on values and principles. So, and again, we spoke about this in the first half of it. Comes back to trust, values, principles, that these things happen. But that's what was really impressive for me is that affected him from when he was like 21 years old. I don't know how old he is now. He said he was 130, so that's a long time. But it means that they stick and that they mean something and they're important to him, and it's foundational, and that's carried on with him. It'd be interesting, I think, what is he like as a leader?
Well, all we have to do is reach out to him and say, can I buy you a coffee and ask some questions? What I took from that, because I obviously at the start of my career, I started off thinking I wanted to be a lawyer, and spent, did the law degree and the LPC, and then worked in a law firm in two law firms for a total of about 4.5 years. And one of the things that I definitely had people I would call mentors outside in like my personal life, but in my work life, there was no one, and those were horrific for you. I hated every day going into the office. I didn't do anything that was worthwhile. The work I was doing wasn't great, and I sort of was waiting for something to change. And actually, I think back and go, had I being able to feel like I could find someone that could mentor me, again, not in an official way, but just give me a bit more of a heads up about what life was going to be like if you carry on down that path, or what was expected of me. It was only when I left that and started doing development and working in other companies, I was like, oh well, this is fun. This is, and you find those mentors where you go, oh, that's why this way of working is so much better. So if you can find people when you're younger, that can have such a different effect on the rest of your life. The other thing that I wanted to briefly touch on was when he was talking about educating new startups. One of the things that is never taught in schools, it appears, is finance and looking after your own money. And you sort of have to make it work as you get a job, and then you start to spend money, you get a mortgage or a car or whatever. And at no point has anyone said, this is the way that you should be, trying to work, because finance is something that, as long as you don't get into too much debt, or if you are getting into debt, it's controlled and it's not accidental, then you don't end up in this debt spiral and then end up becoming bankrupt or whatever. It's so vitally important that it should be taught in schools. The fact that he's teaching it to new businesses, I mean, in some respects, is a bit scary that you've got these people going, yeah, I'm going to start a business. Oh, but I'm actually completely broke. When I say that, I don't mean that, circumstances have meant that you haven't got a job. You're broke from that perspective. It's more that you can't run your finances. You might have a job, you're running your finances, and actually you just keep gambling, or you have a really expensive habit or something. You just keep wanting to buy sports cars that you can't afford on finance, and it turns out that you don't have any money. It's that sort of trying to prevent that and get into good financial good financial practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I do think that financial planning and financial education is just so vital.
I think bringing that back into sort of more of taking it forward into the business environment, I think it's understanding as well about one of the hardest things to do then is understand scale, because there are lots of different ways to finance a business, for example. And one of them is, everyone just thinks, I'll just get an angel investor and they'll give me £1 million, and then I'll make 10 million, and then we'll get another round of investment, and that'll be 20 million, and then we'll be 100 million. And there's no concept of, do you know how hard that is? Do you know the questions? I mean, Jeff did touch on some of the questions that they ask. He was talking about SaaS businesses and saying, I want £2 million recurring revenue. I want 50% year growth on growth. And that's 10% of what they're interested in. So the numbers have got to stack up. And then second, it's like, when I'm going to rip apart the leadership team and go, I really need to know that these people are going to do what they say they do. And this guy doesn't spend, we give them $20 million and we spend 10 million on buying the leadership team a Tesla and a jet. It's like...
Well, I mean, it's interesting as well, because those numbers that he was talking about, he's obviously looking at later stage companies.
It's not early seed
a startup's not going to have 2 million annual recurring revenue. But like for some of the earlier stage ones, I talk to quite a lot of people who are early stage companies, and if they have had investment, there's a relaxation that you go, I've got that money in the bank. That's good, and you can then get a bit sloppy with what you're spending money on. And sometimes actually you do need that, if you might need to get a new laptop, and actually if that makes you feel more productive, then it's worthwhile, because you also have to perform a task, rather than going, I'll just go for the cheapest thing and it's horrible and I hate it. But also the one of the issues that I've personally found with running the business, and it's how much money you've got, and you're trying to forecast things, and that's impossible, because the arrow could go through the roof, or it could just trickle along the bottom. But also all of the expenses, there's so much that goes into it. There are the taxes that you have to pay, which you might not be expecting. VAT is such a horrible one, because in the early days you're making more expenses, so actually you get money back on VAT, and then suddenly you get clients, and then you go, I've got a £3,000 VAT bill because I've invoiced this one client. You go, that's I hadn't thought about that, because I'd sort of been used to getting money back from the government. And the taxes around paying yourself. So when I first paid myself a salary, I went, there are a lot more taxes in here than I was expecting. That's that changes a few things. So
Yeah,
it's there's so much to think about, but it's trying, as you said, be really pernickety about it,
yeah,
and keep an eye on it. But I think it's understanding that everything that you do, because one of the other things about, being a startup is, when I started this and it was just me, there is a belief that you sort of go, well, it's just my time. It doesn't cost anything.
yeah.
Actually, everything, your time
Dangerous.
does cost, because, you lose a day, you've still got to pay for, 3 meals a day, or, for new clothes for that day, whatever it is, everything costs. And it's one of the big issues that I see with so many teams and so many companies, is they don't appreciate that all time costs. So if you have a daily stand-up and you've got 10 people and it takes an hour, that's 10 hours worth
10 hours.
of time that you've paid for people to stand around, where most of them probably aren't listening. So it's like, try to appreciate that everything costs money, and try to keep control of it. I wouldn't say keep it low, but make sure that it doesn't slip.
Or you understand what it costs in the first place.
Yeah.
That, just that realization that, yes, average, my business, if it's got 20 people in, that's 20 times 8 hours a day. That's 160 hours a day that you're paying for.
Yeah.
So how do you use those? Stephen Bartlett's famous for talking about his tokens, isn't he? We get 8 tokens a day. How are you going to use them? How are you going to place those bets? So one of the last kind of silly, I called them, well, the education one wasn't silly. I wanted to just chuck in one silly question. I think I had a couple in there. But this one was about, there seems to be this fascination with morning routines for successful people, and I've got no idea if this guy's successful or not. I assume because of all those things he's done, that this guy didn't, he's not on the bread line, he's not living out of cardboard boxes, and if he's a venture capitalist, then he's got a few pounds and pence in the bank. So based on that, it was like, what's your morning routine? Was that a stupid thing to ask him, or what did you think to his answer? I mean, it was...
No, I thought that it's very interesting, because again, you're sort of talking about the difference between the Hollywood startup CEO type person and normal people, where going to bed and getting up at the same time. So many podcasts I'm listening to now are saying that's actually essential for your long-term health. So that makes complete sense to me. I have to say, I loved his office. I thought it looked more like a home than my home does. So
he didn't have any guitars up.
No. Well, I've put them up just so that they show in this video, obviously.
They're your wives, aren't they?
Yeah. But no, I think it is important, because it also brings it down to realism, where it's when I think it was Mark Wahlberg who had his daily calendar leaked. And you just think that's firstly not. I don't believe personally that that's sustainable. He must be training for something, but also I feel like all of that just promotes this idea that that's the way that you've got to be in order to be successful.
Yes,
and actually,
yes.
you need to know what works for you and what doesn't. I mean, we've both talked about how we're stopping drinking so much coffee because of things that we've been told, and myths and rumors and all of that. But personally, I do feel better for drinking less coffee. So that's an improvement that's working for me. And it's all about those little incremental improvements, but also trying to come up with a way that you can inject that into your life, so that can be your routine, so that you can be a better person. It's just...
one of the things I look at those routines and go, first of all, he's either got a lot of money or no kids. If you say something, I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I do an hour and a half at the gym, and then I go and do an hour of Pilates, and then I have, I go to this same place and I get a coffee and this, kind of unicorn poo food that no one normally eats and costs £1 million.
You're loving the unicorns at the moment.
I am, yeah. And then, I start work at 7:30 and I do an hour and a half of, I just read my emails and I check with my broker and I do this thing, and then I start the day and I think, what?
Yeah.
You must be the most selfish person on the planet. Where does your family come to? Where's walking the dog? Where's, kind of the kids are screaming and shouting, or they need, where are my shoes? All that kind of stuff. Does that happen? Now, what Mark Wahlberg, the example you used there, I'm sure he doesn't live on his own. He's got a wife and children.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's probably got an entourage.
Yeah, and trainers and everyone else that,
and
he's not
chef.
there. Yes, exactly. I was just going to say cooking. He's not the one over the stove going, right, I've got to
Got
wait for
eggs,
this
love.
to boil down. Yeah.
He's got his own personal chef. So it really does, because these people are so influential to people. As you say, I think the key bit there that you said was that if you don't do that, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
That word 50
Yeah.
times. I would say it into their faces. They are an outlier. They're a complete outlier. I would say 99.9% of people will probably do that once a year. The rest of you are like, oh, I can't be asked. It's raining. Oh, I'm not going to go out for a run this morning.
Yeah.
It takes an immense amount of energy, will, selfishness, if you want to put it for a better word, to have that much focus inwardly on yourself to be successful.
Yeah.
It's unsustainable.
It's also it's too inflexible.
Yeah.
If you're living with, I know some people who are, they subscribe to the 5 a.m. club, but they get up at 5 a.m. and then spend most of the morning just sat looking at a computer screen because they're exhausted. You think, well, but they got up at 5, so they're going to be successful. But it doesn't. It's about flexibility. Everything about this stuff is about flexibility and rolling with the punches. And actually, thinking about the punches, I think it was Muhammad Ali. I think it was one of the main named boxers that you know about, saying everyone has a boxing plan until they get punched. Yeah. And then everything goes out the window. And it's like, yeah, that's, how many days do you wake up, go, right, today I'm going to do this, this, and this. And you turn on your computer and the first email you go, all of that's not going to happen now because I've got to focus on this instead. So yeah,
that's reality.
Everything's just levers that you're pulling, and try to make sure that the ones you're pulling on the hardest have the most positive effect on your life. Yeah. Yeah. And don't get upset if you can't do something. Embrace the flexibility, so if something goes wrong, you can cope with that.
I felt that Jeff's response was a very valiant attempt to say it's actually quite boring. It's quite not boring. Okay, let me rephrase that. It was actually quite normal. I get up and go to bed at about the same time. I don't really do much. I don't have this kind of massive exercise regime. I just that's kind of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's so true.
I thought it was great.
Action's the best.
Yeah. I thought it was great. I think that, that's what people need to hear. Not really. Kind of go to bed kind of roughly about the same time. So I can get up nice and early and, whatever, come into the office. It's only 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
Rather than,
I was going to say we've been rambling on quite long now.
We really have.
But yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting chat. I think we definitely need to have him back a bit more, and maybe even delve a bit more into some of the training that he gives to startups, because I think that's quite relevant. I think it's important for companies to try to maintain more of a startup mentality so that they can keep innovating, especially if they're in the creative fields. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to get him back.
Yeah, I think you're right. Drilling down and kind of compartmentalizing it and picking maybe one or two subjects rather than just an initial. What we've done is got to know Jeff this way. But being able to delve into these, kind of in more deeply would, I think, be fascinating. And I definitely want to get his books. I want to kind of understand the guy more from reading the book. So that's on my list. And if anybody out there if you've read his books and would like to comment and talk to us about those, we'd love to hear how maybe they've influenced you. Have they changed your life? Have they had a dramatic effect on you, or the opposite? You hated them. I mean, that's okay, right? I mean, you put stuff out there and you hope that everyone loves it, but some people don't. An emotional reaction is what you want. Apathy is not. So don't talk to us. If you're apathetic about it, then don't get in touch. But if you've got a reaction, then we'd love to hear it.
If you're apathetic about it, don't bother. Yeah, sounds good.
John, as always, thank you very much for your very insightful look at the interview. I think you've added a lot of value to that for people, and kind of brought it back down to earth. I just get locked up in the kind of the fascination with these people. I love these doing these interviews and podcasts and things. So, but you're great. You bring it back down to earth, and see it with a different lens than I do. So I think hopefully people get a lot out of that, and it will mean something to them. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, I hope so. Pleasure.
Talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Cheers.
Bye, John.
Bye.